back to the Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price. Also, I'm your chief honcho, the grand poobah of the wonderful organization called the Society for the Advancement of Financial Education here in Texas. But we have the grandest of poobahs of all, the one and only Steve Beaman of the Society. And we're delighted to always have him on. He comes in every month. He kind of gets us up to date and tells us what's happening. We're excited about the stuff that we're doing right here in Texas, building a bigger and broader footprint in order to enlighten individuals and to expand their knowledge. If you want more information about it here in Texas, you want to get involved, you can always email me at info@usdailyreview.com. Meanwhile, you can also check out stevebeamangroup.org. That's stevebeamangroup.org. Okay, so before the break, we talked a lot about the employment numbers, about the scary stuff that coming down with Obamacare. You have some key numbers that we decided to go ahead and hold till this segment. Go right ahead.
Yeah, but first and foremost, I have to tell you, now I've got to live up to the title of Grand Poobah.
Yeah, well, you need to spend some time watching the Flintstones. You'll learn all about that when you look at their lodge, you know?
Yeah, but what I wanted to get at, there were just numbers released that the Generation X folks, and those are people between 35 and 45, on average, they have the scary sum of $33,000 put away for retirement. Now, what's relevant about that is that as Obamacare comes into play, it will be using something called community rating. Community rating is an insurance pricing mechanism that effectively transfers wealth from younger generations to older generations. And what that's going to do to the Generation Xers is material. And those folks need to be ultra aware of this so they can plan for their own financial safety and financial future.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You know, people wonder about the virtues of democracy. This is a great example of the horrors of democracy and how the founding fathers warned that democracy was just another form of extremism, just like oligarchy or an autocrat. And what do I mean by that? Well, how many times more likely is a person over the age of 50 to vote versus a person under the age of 25 to vote?
Well, you're very right. And again, I go back to basic education for people, Kevin. We need to make people understand that we were founded as a republic, quote, if you can keep it,
yep,
versus a democracy, because the tyranny of the majority is very real. So it's all about education. It's all about empowering people with the knowledge they need at that 30,000-foot level, but also down when the rubber meets the road with their own life. So we work, and as you know, we're striving to help people get the message and then get the tools to build a better life for themselves. Because these numbers, especially when you look at that Generation X, that's really frightening.
Yeah, no question about it. And so you're sitting there and you're looking at that as a young person. You're already having a hard enough time getting a job. This generation even harder than your and my generation when we were looking for jobs as teenagers during the Carter years. It's incredible.
On that, they just came out and said we added 175,000 jobs in May. That's good until you look at first-time claims for unemployment, which were at 330,000.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
The way you want that number to be.
And a lot of the people who got those new jobs already had jobs. They were adding another part-time job.
That's right. So I think we need to be careful of the data. Everybody knows that we're not in a robust recovery, and we're not in a robust recovery because of government. Government is the source of this problem, and the solution is to reduce it. I got into a discussion recently with Elizabeth Warren people about her statement that, we've seen the GDP to income level really explode through the 1980s and up to today, and the wealthy get wealthier, the middle and poor people get middle and poor. And part of the reason for that is the taking of the dollar off the gold standard. That created a fiat currency which allowed banks to make the money they made. So I hate to be a drone, but you go back to the source of our problems is universally government.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Money was never meant to be a political entity. It was an economic entity. And when they took it off the gold standard starting in the 1930s and entirely by the early 1970s, we have not had stable currency by historical measures since then.
No, and it's allowed the banks to create these derivative instruments to explode our, both national and international debt. And that serves only to make the banking class wealthier. It's a predictable event. It's happened before in history. But I think people need to be aware that this is the kind of thing government does. And then it turns around and blames business. Well, if you don't agree with a business monopoly, why on earth would you believe with a government monopoly?
There you go. All right, let's talk a little bit, because you're very savvy, more so than I am, on some of the micro issues. I like the macro, but you like the micro. Walmart unveils its $15 billion share buyback program. program. What's up with that?
Well, this is going on throughout corporate America right now. These companies, from 2009 to present, have cut their costs, they've reduced their debt, and their sales have been relatively flat, but their profits have grown. That's flooded their bank accounts with excess cash. There are trillions of dollars sitting in corporate bank accounts today, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't want to reinvest it because they're afraid of the economy. So what they're doing is buying their own stock back. In effect, they're reprivatizing. So this is not just Walmart. We've seen it everywhere. The problem with publicly owned companies is that there is these incentives. They continuously suffer from what economists, particularly free market economists, call the short-sightedness effect. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Just like politicians that are up for re-election every 2 or 4 or 6 years, they got to do stuff that will affect their voters now, even if it has adverse long-term effects. Businesses that are publicly owned almost have the exact same problem because of what happens daily in the way people vote with their shares. That's exactly right, and that's why you have a quarter-to-quarter measurement system on the street, because those company earnings each quarter affect their stock price, which in turn affects the wealth of the employees. So there is very heavily a quarter-to-quarter thing. The one thing I'd like to point out to listeners, though, is they look to bash business. Here's the good news. When business messes up, there is a natural control mechanism called the free market. If they don't take care of their customers, they go out of business. Counter that with government. If this Affordable Care Act doesn't work, you got nowhere to run. So I think it's part, again, of educating people on the reality of these circumstances. Yeah, I was it Latvia that last week was added to the Eurozone? Meanwhile, no country in the Eurozone is doing much anything in the productivity department except for Germany. And now I was reading in the New York Times that German central bank cuts growth prediction for 2013. I mean, this is pretty dire, Steve. Surprise, Kevin. I mean, how can people honestly think in something like the Eurozone you're going to get productivity out of countries like Greece and Spain and Italy when Germany's carrying the weight? It's no different than a neighborhood kid who says, I'm going to cut grass around the neighborhood, Mom. Neighbors say, okay, we'll pay you $10 to do it. When he's done cutting the grass, the neighborhood bully says, give me your money. You know, it just shows you, people wondered whether or not the Germans were repentant from World War II. You and I both know the only reason why they joined the Eurozone was because of fear and angst over World War II. Oh, there's no question. There's so much going on. But I think the euro as a currency has seen its last days. I know there's a lot of movement in England to get out of it. There's a lot of movement throughout Europe to say this just isn't working. There's no either we become one nation. They're kind of like the Confederate States of America, the Articles of Confederation. Yeah. It's a very loose conglomeration. They either need to be stronger, like one country, or they need to break it apart. All right, there you go. Steve Beaman, he's with the Society for the Advancement of Financial Education. Learn more about them at stevebeamangroup.org, or you can email me directly at info@usdailyreview.com. As we get closer to August, we're going to be promoting heavier this big event that he's coming in, and we're looking at several events. And not only is it going to be a great speaking event for Steve, but we're going to get your opinions, your views on what's happening in the political front as I have sessions where I'll be recording people's opinions on some of these things. This could be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a great time, Kevin. And as always on these Mondays, my only regret is we don't have all day to do this. But that's right. I've got other guests, and I've got things to do. So I wish a very strong, productive, and healthy week for all of our friends down in Houston. We'll see you soon. See you here next week right here on The Price of Business. When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there, like great articles by our friend Steve Beaman. He's there every week at usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook. Follow it on Twitter.